Breaking the Codes, Times and Seasons. Part 6, Value of Synchronism and Chronology. Introduction, Part 6. Although lengthy, the following historical fact needs to be understood before studying the importance of the synchronism and chronology of 457 BC and the synchronisms and chronology of the Bible as a whole. Section 1 is taken from an article which can be found at Four Angels Publications under Articles, the Lunar Sabbath and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This article is used without prejudice to demonstrate the validity of chronology and the impact it has in the lack of understanding of His Word if neglected. This writer is persuaded that the purpose of the Creator in preserving so many synchronism in His written Word and so many chronological dates corresponding in history was and is specifically for these last days of Earth history in order to declare His true and unique luni-solar barley harvest law calendation as restored by the Millerites in 1844. Though lost through time and events for more than 1,260 years till 1798 and 175 years now in 2019 since 1844, it is high time for these synchronisms to be studied using the premises of 1844 calendar reckoning of October 22, 1844. According to the Pen of Inspiration in the Great Controversy, 1888, page 457, the computation of the prophetic periods 457 BC, 27 AD, 31 AD, 34 AD, and October 22, 1844, on which that message was based, taken in Daniel chapter 8 verse 14, Daniel chapter 9 verses 24 to 27, and Revelation chapter 14 verse 7, placing the close of the 2300 days in the autumn of 1844, stands without impeachment. Section 1, the Lunar Sabbath and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Here is part of the article referred to, the Lunar Sabbath and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Dr. Jacques Ducan, professor of Hebrew and Old Testament exegesis at Andrews University, was the featured speaker at workers' meeting for the Upper Columbia Conference of Seventh-day Adventists in August of 2007. The conference was considering establishing a church plant in Spokane, Washington, to reach Messianic Jews. Ducan was invited to speak to the conference ministers about the annual feast. According to 3 people in attendance, a number of pastors voiced questions about the biblical calendar. One of the pastors stated that at that time, Ducan acknowledged that when the Sabbath is calculated by the biblical calendar, it will fall differently. If the Sabbath on the biblical calendar does not fall on Saturday, why does the Seventh-day Adventist Church still teach that Saturday is the Sabbath? Why has the leadership not informed the church members? How long has the leadership known that Saturday is not the true Bible Sabbath? The history of the Lunar Sabbath teaching within the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the sad story of a cover-up spanning decades. Heaven has tried many times to bring this truth to the world, but each time spiritual pride or fear of the consequences of accepting such a radically different truth has led the Church to reject it and, still more, to cover up the evidences in support of this truth. In the mid-1990s, questions arising out of California and Washington regarding the concept of the Lunar Sabbath prompted the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists to take action. In 1995, An order originating from the office of then GC President Robert Falkenberg Sr. commissioned a study group to look into the issue of calculating the Sabbath by the ancient Hebrew lunisolar calendar. The committee members consisted of 5 scholars handpicked from the seminary at Andrews University. In addition to these 5, there was also a representative from the ministerial department of the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists and another representative from the ministerial department of the General Conference. Robert M. Johnson, professor of New Testament and Christian origins at the seminary, was selected to head this research committee. No representative from the Biblical Research Institute was on the committee, as it was felt that the well-respected scholarship of the various members was of sufficient authority that it was not needed. The vaults were thrown open for the committee. They were asked to research the Grace Amadon collection, housed at the Center for Adventist Research at Andrews University, as well as the 4-volume series, The Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, by Leroy Edwin Froom. Additional material supplied the committee for study was a series of letters written by well-respected Adventist scholar M.L. Andreasen. A research paper on the subject by Elder J. H. Wirtz was to be provided, but before it could be studied, something unexpected happened. It had been expected that the committee would be able to very quickly refute the idea of a lunar Sabbath. What was not expected was what actually happened. As the committee members began studying into the subject, a number of them became convicted of its truth. The fact is, the entire Seventh-day Adventist denomination was founded upon a belief that the 2300-day year prophecy of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 14, ended on October 22, 1844, as taught by the Millerite movement of the 1840s. This is significant because the only way to arrive at that date is by using the ancient biblical lunisolar calendar. As far back as April, and then in June and December of 1843, and in February of 1844, months before William Miller's original dates expired for the ending of the Jewish year 1843, at the time of the vernal spring equinox in 1844, his associates Sylvester Bliss, Josiah Litch, Joshua V. Imes, Nathaniel Southard, Apollos Hale, Nathan Whiting, and others came to a definite conclusion. This was that the solution of Daniel's prophecy is dependent upon the ancient or original Jewish form of lunisolar time and not upon the altered modern rabbinical Jewish calendar. They therefore began to shift from Miller's original date for the ending of the 2300 years at the equinox in March over to the new moon of April 1844. Leroy Froom, The Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, Volume 4, page 796. Without the original lunisolar calendar, there would be no Day of Atonement on October 22nd in 1844. This ancient method of time measurement was the very foundation for determining the time prophecy and the cleansing of the sanctuary doctrine, which is the hallmark belief of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which grew out of the Millerite movement. It is important to note in the above quote that a distinction must be made between the ancient or original Jewish form of lunisolar time and the altered modern rabbinical Jewish calendar in use by Jews around the world today. The calendar used by Jews today is not the same as what used in biblical time. Under intense persecution following the Council of Nicaea, Jews fixed their calendar to align with the continuous weekly cycle of the Julian calendar. Consequently, the Jews in 1844 kept the Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur on September 23rd and not on October 22nd, as the Millerite and later the Seventh-day Adventists claimed was the true Day of Atonement. The fact that the Jews observed the Day of Atonement on September 23rd and not October 22nd was a point well known to the Millerites. There were many in 1844 who made merry over a lunar reckoning that was not based upon the modern Jewish calendar. The answer was returned. Every scholar knows that we are correct as to the Karaite original Hebrew seventh month. The Millerites were well aware of the rabbinical seventh month in September in 1844, and the circumstance was often mentioned in their papers. At the same time, they were emphatic in their challenge that they dissented from the modern Jewish calendar because it did not agree with the laws of Moses. Heaven used the Millerite movement to restore to the world a knowledge of the original calendar of creation, uncorrupted by the later traditions of rabbinical Jews reconciling their observances to the pagan Julian calendar. Painstakingly studying the Karaite Jewish protest in the Middle Age against the rabbinical perversion of the calendar, they at last deliberately and irrevocably accepted, restored, and applied to their time prophecy problem the earlier calendation championed by the Karaites. And this they did in defiance of the whole body of rabbinical scholarship and the general current practice of Jewry, which change was introduced in the same century and at approximately the same time that the Roman Church changed the Sabbath by church law from the seventh to the first day of the week. The Millerites knew the ancient luni-solar calendar so well that they were able to calculate in advance the Day of Atonement. Without this understanding, there would have been no seventh-month movement, no midnight cry, and later, no cleansing of the sanctuary doctrine within Adventism. It is not too strong a statement to say that without the luni-solar calendar, there would be no 2300-day doctrine within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The problem is, when the Sabbath is calculated by the original biblical calendar, it does not fall on Saturday because the weekly cycle of the luni-solar calendar does not align with the weekly cycle of the Gregorian calendar, which is a solar calendar. Furthermore, this can be proven by the fact that if the 2300 days of year time period started in 457 BC, as taught by both the Millerites and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the year AD 31 is pinpointed as the year of the crucifixion. When the lunisolar calendar for AD 31 is overlaid, the Julian calendar for the same year, Passover, the sixth day of the week, does not fall on Friday. For further discussion on this point, please see the problem of the crucifixion date. What wisdom the Lord gave those earnest, God-fearing, and sincere believers to proclaim to the world that they were following the calendar adopted by the Karaite Jews, those Jews who professed to follow the scripture rather than following the calendar adopted by the rabbinical Orthodox Jews who were following a calendar which they admit is inaccurate in its mode of reckoning. This is written by F. C. Gilbert. This was the problem facing the study committee of 1995, to acknowledge that the Church's sole unique contribution to Protestant theology was based upon a different method of timekeeping, was to open the floodgates to a problem they did not wish to deal with, the problem that the Biblical Sabbath is not Saturday. When interviewed, one of the committee members stated, "The main thing that the North American Division men wanted to cover up was the fact that October 22nd is based on Jewish lunar calculation. He said that they were wanting to get people thinking that it was based on solar calendation. This led to extremely heated discussions among the committee members. This author does not know precisely what position the men from the North American Division and the General Conference took, but according to interviews, 3 of the 5 members from Andrews University were vocal in their support for a truthful and consistent stance on the establishment of the date of October 22, 1844. A committee member recalled some of the discussion that took place over the issue, stating emphatically, "Anytime you have October 22nd and it is your hallmark doctrine, it is the hallmark doctrine that sets your denomination apart as distinct and separate from all other denominations, and it is based on Jewish lunar calculation. And then you give people the idea that you got it from the solar calendar, you are lying." Several of us were very, very hard on them. When asked if the church officials who appointed the committee, in their ignorance of the topic, actually thought that the study committee could refute the lunar Sabbath, he replied, "In their ignorance, they actually thought they had a committee that would rubber stamp whatever they were told to agree to. But after a few meetings, they saw that they could get nothing of a consensus from us, they couldn't bully us, and they shut it down. They saw that they were about to open Pandora's box, and so they shut it down." The committee members who did not feel comfortable speaking up in support of an open admission of the calendar used to establish October 22nd as the Day of Atonement in 1844, nevertheless saw the truth of what the others were saying. One of them admitted to another, "I see what you are saying, and I agree with you." When asked why then he had not spoken up in the committee, he replied, "Are thou he that troubled Israel? If I am viewed as a liberal, I will lose everything. The fastest way to destroy your career in the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to be branded a liberal scholar. If I come out and I agree with you, my career will be over. I will lose my job. I will lose everything. Once you are labeled a liberal in the Adventist Church, you are dead." Even Chairman Johnston went so far as to admit, "I agree with what you are saying, and that is why I do not teach Bible chronology. Men and women are saved by grace, and so that is what I teach. I do not teach Bible chronology." In order to spare the corporate church the embarrassment of having to admit that Saturday was not actually the biblical Sabbath, the study committee was shut down and the subject was suppressed. Or, as one committee member recalled, it was feared the truth would blow up the church.